Welcome to Building Bridges Back, NVR Parent Group, Week 2, Catch Up. This week we discussed ideas of how to be a good parent. We talked about traditional authority in which the parent is in control, liberal approaches in which the child is in control, and new authority, which balances the needs of the child and the adult. New authority is not about giving in, but neither is it about trying to control. It does rest heavily on the idea of de-escalation. The NVR framework uses 4 key concepts: resisting behaviour, persisting over time, uniting with other adults, and repairing our relationships. In order to repair our relationships, what we need to think about is de-escalation. When we are escalating, we tend to meet fire with fire or give in. What this tends to do, though, is to reduce our sense of control as adults, which is perceived as a threat by the emotional centre of the brain and can lead us into fight or flight. As we discussed last week in terms of young people, activation of the threat centre can result in the shield of shame being activated. It's important to note that we as adults can also suffer from this when we are in a threat situation. When the shield of shame is activated, this can result in something called blocked care, which can also be compared to the concept of burnout. This is to do with the emotional work that's required to control your own emotional response in the face of difficult behaviours. And what happens is that over time your energy levels to do that emotional work can be diminished. This is the reason why we're asking you every week to tell us about your self-care practices, because this is a really important part of the programme that we're doing. You might recognise some of the statements here. These tend to be the result of blocked care, when the emotional energy has run so low that it's difficult to engage properly. Now, what we can also see sometimes is a negative spiral of a blocked care pattern. And you see here that the carer or parent reaches out and is rejected. They then feel angry or sad. There's a threat situation. They feel less control as an adult. These feelings are communicated to the child verbally, but more importantly non-verbally, in terms of tone of voice, body language, position. What can sometimes happen there then is that the child will reach out and attempt to repair the relationship, but the adult themselves has had to absorb so much emotional work that they are unable to connect with that. This then leaves the child feeling rejected, and we end up in a negative spiral of blocked care. What we're going to be doing in this programme is we're targeting parental presence. We'll be working on each of you raising your parental presence. This is going to rest on 4 key areas: full of physical aspects like time and space, when and where do you do the difficult parenting work; an emotional and moral stance, which is about not being drawn into arguments, about taking the moral high ground as an adult and being able to control your emotional response; thinking, so we're going to be planning what we're going to say to young people, what behaviours we're going to target, and we're going to try and avoid responding emotionally in the moment. We'll also be looking at building social support networks around other adults in yours and your child's life, and this will very much help raise your parental presence. The first steps in de-escalation is looking after yourself. Make sure you have enough energy to absorb the emotions that you will have to do this difficult work, and that means actively engaging in self-care practices. We've already looked last week at understanding the threat response, at fight or flight, and the shield of shame. So trying to remember to be mindful of these in the moment. We'll also be discussing looking behind the behaviour. So what we would say is that all behaviour is communication. So even when your child's behaviour seems utterly inexplicable, it is in itself communicating something. We're going to use de-escalation techniques to bring the emotional temperature of these conversations down, which is going to allow us to work much more effectively and engage the thinking part of people's brains. Hand in hand with all of this is the concept of making relational gestures. Now, these are unconditional acts of kindness. They are not punishments and rewards. They are pre-planned, regular, structured acts of kindness. What we're actively doing is repairing any small damage that might have been done to the relationship through cycles of blocked care. When we're thinking about de-escalation strategies, these are the things that we will be talking about. The first is strike while the iron's cold. There's no point in trying to have a discussion while everybody's emotional temperature is high. What we need to do there is to take a step back and build a relationship and pick the right time to do those difficult conversations. Along with this, we will be working on the rule of 1. Rather than trying to target 7 behaviours all at once, we're going to focus laser-like on one of them. Part of that work is going to be about constructing autopilot statements which allow you to respond in the moment without risking emotional threat cycle. We'd also be encouraging you to offer young people a way out when you're in conflict, demanding explanations and demanding correction. These things quite often just raise the emotional temperature and raise the conflict level. What we want to do is to offer young people a way out which allows them in some way to save face while also stopping the behaviour and preventing the shield of shame being activated. Now, ways that we can add on to this are thinking about our presentation, using a quiet tone or a warm tone of voice and using non-threatening body language. We would also recommend using start rather than stop requests, as stop requests tend to make people feel threatened and shamed, which, as we've already discussed, is not going to productively help us target these behaviours. And the last thing we would ask you to think about is curiosity statements. We've all said to young people, why are you doing that, or why did you do that? Now, that's a rather big question to ask a young person. Much more effective is to use curiosity statements. I wonder if you were feeling tired from school today. I wonder if you were feeling a little bit stressed and nervous because of the things that have been on the news. What these do is they don't ask the child to directly explain themselves or create the conditions for threat and shield of shame. This will allow us to have much more productive conversations by de-escalating the conversations when they're happening. So I hope this short video has been a good little catch up from the work that we did last week, and feel free to get in touch if you want to discuss anything that has been presented today.